It does seem strange. My mother was a Christian and a royalist. And my father, let's call him an atheist for simplicity's sake, who detested the royalty, the royal family. What a split we have. I considered myself an atheist, oh gosh, for most of my life. Went a little bit the other way for a while, and I'm back with atheism. Mainly because of the way some Christians have treated me this year. All was going well up until about Christmas time on that front, actually. But of course I also have no choice but to be an atheist, because I am a feminist. And when I say feminist, I mean the old kind of feminist who believes in equal rights for women, who recognises that women were discriminated against because they do have vaginas, not because they don't have vaginas, which is the complaint of a trans woman. I'm not a trans woman. I am a born woman. Down centuries, we have been terribly discriminated against because of our ability to give birth. I do know what women suffered in centuries gone by, but frankly what I've suffered in my own life would be more than enough to let me know from my own experience that there is no such thing as female privilege. Just exactly the opposite, actually. And a man can never understand it, ever. Never. I'm sorry to have to say this, but one of the reasons for that is that men actually do think differently from women. So anyway, my reasons for atheism are encapsulated in my feminism. I couldn't support any Abrahamic religion. None of them, nor any male-dominated religion which pretty much takes care of them all. My father hated the royal family. The reason he gave was their drain on the public person. I've been over this just recently. You know, their hangers-on, he used to call them. All the relatives who are getting handouts from the public. Handouts worth millions apiece. He also claimed not to like inherited wealth. So it was a little odd that he ensnared my mother, who had come from inherited wealth, and proceeded to use her trust fund for his own gain. I hate the royal family because they killed Princess Diana. And I will express it as a fact because I have seen and heard all the evidence. It doesn't end there. I'm not too sure what to think of Kevin Annett, but what we do know for an absolute certainty is a lot of native Canadian children went missing, thousands of them. He says that has to do with our royal family. I have no reason to disbelieve that. And then, of course, we come to our David Icke stuff. I wouldn't have too much problem believing that they're not human. Even Princess Diana said it. They're not human. Whether she meant that they were reptilians, I don't know. She did say something like that. I don't know, but not human, not from what I've seen. So there I am, in that respect, on my father's side. Anti-Christian, anti-royalty. Of course, he was anti-Christian because of his time in Hitler Youth and Nazi Germany, and because of a headmaster at Bishop's Cotton School in Bangalore. That definitely turned him against Christianity. I will never, however, be a Tory. He claimed to be a Tory, which was the closest he could get to admitting to being a Nazi, although actually in many, many ways throughout my childhood he did admit to being a Nazi. Normal people don't get their little children to draw swastikas, for example, or 88s, which is the code for Heil Hitler. There were dozens and dozens of clues, such as his avoidance of the questionnaires. I was always suspicious of him. He always engendered in me a feeling of suspicion. I always knew when he was lying and hiding things. And when I asked what the photographs were taken in Germany, he said it was the German Boy Scouts. I've been over this. There was no German Boy Scouts. It was Van der Vogel and Hitler Youth. And then there was the fact that he would never ever hear a word against Germany, but didn't have any affection whatsoever for England. And when finally he took my mother abroad in the 80s, where did they go? Wiesbaden, where he'd been as a boy. It was Wiesbaden he wanted to see again. Still, just as he passed himself off as an atheist, not a Satanist, he passed himself off as a Tory, not a Nazi. My brother is a Tory. His son is a Tory. Well, one of his sons, anyway. On Facebook today, my daughter asked me what the hell is going on. Where did it begin? I never thought I would have to actually discuss my father with my nephew when I think he sent me a friendship request actually on Facebook. I'm pretty sure, yeah, he did. I thought it was an opportunity to get to know my nephew. So, memories are the damnedest thing on Facebook. There have been literally dozens I would have liked to reshare and haven't because of my family being my friends on Facebook. But I did share the photograph of my mother and father in Piccadilly, which my father dated the 11th of July 1946. I don't think I accompanied it with any comment whatsoever. I just shared it. But clearly, my nephew knew more of what I think about that photograph than I thought he did, judging by the comments he made about my father's facial expression, which I had analysed, and my mother's as well. that was where it started on that one, when he insisted that his grandfather had been some kind of a hero who had seen terrible things and fought in Burma. Not one of which statements is anywhere near the truth. He was never in Burma, just for a start. And he sure as hell wasn't a hero. I tried to make my answers as tactful as I could. Then, of course, I sent through a post about the royal family. Probably more than one, I really don't know, and I really don't care. At which point my nephew told me to fuck off to France. And of course there were threats to unfriend me as well. And I took it quite calmly that night, but then unfortunately I do have this habit of thinking about things and getting angry after the event. So then I posted a number of comments to the effect that I would not be silenced, which I won't except by my breathing and death. Oh yes, and I'm sorry because my brother is probably going to hear this, but there was also a lot of bollocks about how people could find jobs if only they tried, and how my nephew had had to move to a different county to get a job. At the time I refrained from saying anything, but the fact is he moved 29 miles. And although Yorkshire has a North Riding and a West Riding and a South Riding, it is all Yorkshire, it's all one county. And the places 29 miles apart are both in Yorkshire. It would be an easy commute, you don't have to move. A very, very, very easy commute. I used to go from Newquay to Aberystwyth every single day on the bus, and it's 28 miles, just 1 mile less. By bus, on roads that are actually dangerous roads. There are regular fatal crashes on that road. They should not be traversed at speed, but they often are. I refrained from pointing out what I do know, although I haven't been around much. Not from Joyce. I refrained from pointing out a lot of things I know. But one my brother I don't think would argue with. Well, I don't see how he could argue with it, really. Is that he was unemployed for several years, after being invalided out of the RAF. Now, had that happened to him in the last 6 years, he would have been found fit for work, and his benefits would have been stopped. There's no doubt at all about it. Many, many terminally ill people have been found fit for work and dropped dead, within weeks, or committed suicide because they've got nothing to live on. If my brother had been unemployed in the last 6 years, I doubt very much that he would still be a Tory, and therefore possibly his children mightn't have been Tories either. I didn't say that either, but I'm saying it now. And so much more that I know. Very, very difficult to keep a lid on it. Very. And apparently my nephew, who probably met my father a dozen times or so, not many more, although my father did spend the last 5 weeks of his life in their house. Apparently. There was no way anyone could get to know him during those 5 weeks because he was drugged up to the nines and lying in bed with a pile of morphine beside him on the bedside table. Not quite sure how they swung that one, but they did. Presumably because my sister-in-law had had some nursing training. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she's not actually a qualified nurse. No chance to get to know him, but apparently I don't know anything. How did he put it? I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, yes, I do. Because I was unable to escape him until I was 40 years old. And I wouldn't have escaped him then if he hadn't, apparently, kicked off this mortal coil. 40 years. As opposed to a dozen or 2 hours. I knew him as a paedophile. I knew him as a sadist. And latterly, I knew him as the man who indirectly confessed 2 murders to me. That was the worst. I knew that he was a Nazi. I knew that he was a Satanist. I knew that he did not fight for his country and that he sustained no injuries whatsoever in World War II. He had peritonitis while he was in the army, but that was before the war. I don't know what caused it. But it was quite definitely before the war. Come Dunkirk, my father was in Brittany, not Normandy. For those who don't know, Dunkirk is in Normandy. My father was several hundred miles away, in Brest, and I have a photograph to prove it. He did not see action in France. After that, he was in England for 2.5 years, in the middle of World War II, during which time he married his wife, the one he apparently forgot to mention to my mother. Well, one of the ones he forgot to mention to my mother, this hero. True, towards the end of the war, he was in India, but judging by his letters, he was having a whale of a time. His letters talk of his servants. They talk of tiffin. They talk of really good food in great, great detail. He went into enormous detail about food, always in his letters. And dancing, and visiting the Pune Club. That's not in Bangalore, that's somewhere else entirely, but then he was. I have a ticket from it. I'll have to flash that up as well. Some posh club in Pune. And regaled with tales of him being so drunk that he walked straight across a fish pond. And other little anecdotes about seeing an iguana for the first time, whereupon his first and natural reaction was to shoot it dead. He liked hunting. He seemed to spend an awful lot of his time in India hunting. He didn't seem to spend any time, judging by his letters, doing anything at all for the army. Well, not the British one, anyway. And then, of course, He and my mother, just post World War II, wound up in Malaya. By now we're talking September 1945 to January 1946. And there were many, many verbal accounts of their time in Malaya and Singapore. And there are also, of course, documents and letters. One place my father never ever was Burma. He was never ever in Burma. His army records are non-specific elsewhere, could mean anything. But my father was, as I say, not the heroic type. He wouldn't have refrained from mentioning Burma because of the horrors that he saw there. He refrained from mentioning Burma because he was never ever there. He couldn't talk about it, he knew nothing of it, except that my mother's brother was there, and my mother's brother had a medal worth having. Not the service medals, just to say you've been in the army a long time, or you were in this particular place at this particular time. Those were the medals he had. Somewhere he also managed to fit in a trip to Jerusalem, and there's a postcard of him there. And is it the Four Quarters? I don't really know. And sometime or another he was in Egypt as well. But then again, we have the photographs of a smiling man. I don't know, the pyramids, I think it was. What I also have, I must flash up these photographs. Oh, photographs of him swimming, diving. Photographs of him lounging on a beach with a man in what was then a women's bathing suit, resting his head on my father's chest. I have called him polysexual in my book, and polysexual he was. In other words, he'd screw anything. I know nothing about my father, except for my 40 years' life experience of him, and words from the horse's mouth, which I will now dig around again and flash up one by one by one on the screen, no matter how much it will upset my family. I don't care now. I didn't start this. I posted a photograph without a comment, and I posted my opinions on royalty, to which I have every right.